Hello, everybody, and welcome to the On Orbit podcast. Today's episode is actually episode number 8 of our Future Space Economy webcast series titled Enhancing the Space Tourism Experience. Before we get on to the interview, I just want to let everybody know that we started announcing speakers for the Satellite 2024 conference and exhibition in March 2024 in Washington, D.C. We started issuing the first invitations. That process will happen throughout the next 2 months. So if you applied to speak at Satellite, please be patient. We're trying to get through as many of the hundreds of proposals as we received as fast as possible. But we do have our 2 general sessions announced, and we have the CEOs from Intelsat and Eutelsat, Telesat, SES, Viasat, EchoStar, all confirmed for our opening general sessions. Visit satshow.com for more details, but we will be announcing hundreds of speakers over the next 6 weeks. So stay tuned. We'll have more information about Satellite 2024. And now on to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the evolution of the space tourism experience. This is episode number 8 of Via Satellite's Future Space Economy webcast series. My name is Jeffrey Hill, executive editor of Via Satellite and chair of the Satellite 2024 show. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you jumped in and heard talk about Biosphere, I was just asking Jane when the first one was, and we'll get into that in just a minute. We're nearing the end of the summer travel season here in the Northern Hemisphere, so I thought it might be interesting for the webcast to focus on the budding space tourism industry, which is working to offer unique experiences for travelers seeking thrilling adventures and life-changing views of the world. Specifically, we'll explore how commercial companies are hoping to broaden the appeal of space travel to a mainstream audience and build more complete experiences, including potentially in-space activities, entertainment, stuff like that you see on your normal vacation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank our Future Space Economy webcast series sponsors. This webcast would not be possible without the support of our Season 1 sponsors, Spider Oak, Kepler, and Sidus Space. These innovative space companies have been extremely supportive of these discussions, providing guidance on our advisory board, helping us connect with the experts needed to create valuable discussions for our listeners. So the team and I want to thank Spider Oak, Kepler, and Sidus Space for their support and ask that you visit our website, www.onorbitspace.com, to learn more about the exciting things they are doing in space. So we have 2 amazing speakers today. We originally planned to have 3, but Laura Forzik from Astrolytical couldn't be with us this morning because she's about to have a child, which is awesome. Congratulations to her. We all send her best wishes. That said, we are lucky to have 2 speakers who are really on the front lines of the space tourism frontier. In just a moment, I'm going to ask them some questions. And I also invite all of you in the audience as well to be a part of that discussion. And the way you can do that is you can ask us questions, the questions you had in mind about space tourism or human space flight. And you can do that by submitting those questions in the Q&A tab, which is on the right-hand side of the webcast interface here. You can ask those questions. And when we see those questions, I'll ask them for you. I'll keep you anonymous. So there's no such thing as a bad question. Please submit as many questions as you can. And we'll try to get to as many as we can. I like to weave them into the discussion as we're talking. I don't like to wait to the very end. If we don't get to your question in time, we will reach out to you offline to answer those questions if possible. So with that said, let's jump into it, meet our guests. First up is Jane Pointer. She's co-founder and CEO of Space Perspective, where she leads efforts to create the most meaningful and memorable experiences possible for space travelers. She was a member of the design team for Biosphere 2, the first prototype space base ever built and operated. Her book, The Human Experiment, 2 years and 20 minutes inside Biosphere 2, chronicles her time as one of the original 8 crew members on that project and the 2 years she spent inside the sealed, self-sustaining habit. She then co-founded and was president of Paragon Space Development that today has technologies on almost every human spacecraft in operation in the US. So thank you, Jane, for being with us. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Awesome. Thanks for having me on. This is great. And Tom, it's great to see you. It's been a while.
It has. Thank you, Jane.
And Jane, you're joining us from the Space Coast in Florida. And could you tell us a little bit about what Space Perspective does and give us an idea of your work?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. So I am founder and co-CEO of Space Perspective. And we are driven to take as many people as possible to space. Really remember that to date, only 650 people have ever been to space. And we're really working to change the paradigm. And we are doing that by taking people to space, not using rockets, but instead using a space balloon like this one right here. And that space balloon allows us to carry a capsule, a fully pressurized capsule for 8 explorers and a captain. You'll see the little tiny capsule right there. It's not actually tiny, it's really big, but by comparison to the balloon, it's really tiny. Initially, there'll be a 6-hour journey, suborbital flight, essentially. So 2 hours up, 2 hours at the top, 2 hours back down. And we've really designed this entire experience for people who maybe don't want to have all those high Gs and all of that training and the spacesuits and everything that people typically think about when they think about space. We've designed this experience to be incredibly gentle. So imagine you can get on a commercial airline. This would be like that.
There we go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jane. And we'll talk a little bit more about the balloon and the ride, the experience up in space. But next, I want to introduce Tom Shelley. Tom is president of Space Adventures, a privately owned company that has arranged 9 flights to space. Is that true? Is it 9 or is it 10?
Depends whether you're counting the time of rocket launches or the number of people who've been on board. So,
well, and we'll get into those details in just a minute. Tom's been president of Space Adventures for more than 15 years, and the company's clients have spent a combined total of over 100 days on board the International Space Station and have traveled 35 million miles in space. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today. It's good to have you. Tell us a little bit about Space Adventures and what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So, well, thank you first, Jeffrey, to you and your team for inviting me and involving me in this discussion. And Jane, great to see you. And thank you to the attendees for taking a little bit of time out of your day and listening to us talk about space tourism. Hope we can enlighten you and leave you with a little bit more knowledge and some questions answered than you came into this. So Space Adventures has been around in the space tourism industry since the very beginning. I think we were the first company to actually arrange for a fare-paying private individual to fly to space. That was Dennis Tito many years ago, back in 2001. And we've been involved in all different aspects of space tourism, from on-the-ground experiences, arranging for people to go and train in the same way that an astronaut or a cosmonaut would train in Star City. We've owned Zero G Corporation for a while and their Zero G plane, providing those weightless flight experiences. We've arranged for people to go into acrobatic jets and high-speed jets to get involved in that element of spaceflight training. We've worked with different companies involved in suborbital spaceflight. We're not offering that now. We're really focused at the moment on the orbital space flights, so flights into low Earth orbit that last for multiple days, whether to the space station or just in low Earth orbit and beyond. So that's kind of where we are. Our last clients flew in December of 2021 on the Russian Soyuz. So all of our clients have flown on Russian vehicles on the Soyuz. And after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we've suspended that relationship, and so we're not working with Russians at this time. We're focusing our attention on our US partners, and we've had a long partnership with Boeing. Sadly, they're a little delayed. They haven't come through for us just yet, but hopefully sometime in the future.
So, Tom, I think we're actually helping create customers for you, because the way we think about it is that people are going to go on Spaceship Neptune first, this very gentle flight to space. Then they're going to get the absolute bug and then they're going to call you and want to go further.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a definite crossover between the two. No, and we thought the same thing when we acquired Zero G. The reality was a little bit different. There wasn't quite as much crossover as we thought, but
yeah, that's a very different experience, though, for sure.
Yeah, your experience goes quite a lot further. I think we've seen that with just a few suborbital flights that have happened to date. There's a number of those individuals where we know are interested in going further and being able to go into Earth.
Exactly.
And that leads perfectly into our discussion, because before I talk about the experiences, and that's where we're going to really focus here on the experience of space tourism, I want to talk about those people. So the people that get the bug, that want to travel into space. On this webcast and other episodes, we've referred to the people as like space curious. They like space. They like the idea of space. They might want to travel to space. Maybe it's it's cost prohibitive. Maybe they're worried about the risks. But what is the market out there for space tourism? Who are the people that are driving space tourism industry? And give us an idea. I'll start with you, Tom, and then and I'll ask Jane for your perspective as well. Tom, like what does the market look like out there?
So it depends on what you define as a space tourism experience, right? So I'm going to answer this from the perspective of an orbital flight. That's really what we're working on at the moment. And so a flight into Earth orbit is a very expensive experience. You're talking many tens of millions of dollars. And so by nature, you are limiting the market size by the number of people who could actually realistically afford it. If we go out and we ask, would you like to do this experience? Generally, about 50% of the population would like at some point to be able to go into space and into Earth orbit. It's not for everybody, that's fine. But when you limit it by putting an actual price on it, then you do get down to a much lower number. To quote there's a study, I think it's Capgemini, the last one that I recall anyway. They look at the ultra high net worth individual population around the world, and they estimate that there's 200,000 people who have a net worth in excess of $30 million. $30 million sadly isn't going to buy you an orbital flight, so you're getting into an even smaller number than that 200,000. So you're talking in the tens of thousands of people around the world who could, at this point, if they chose, decide to go on a flight as a self-paying individual into Earth orbit. So it's a very, very small marketplace. But that 200,000 people, I'm sure, would be very interested in doing what Jane's doing, because that price barrier is significantly lower. And similarly for the suborbital flights as well. So
thank you for that overview of orbital. Now, Jane, do you want to talk about the market for suborbital? For the balloon ride?
Yeah, so I have a very different perspective. Mm-hmm. So I think the barriers to the market isn't just price, it's also the experience, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But there really is a barrier for many people with the idea that they're going to go to space on a rocket, because of the experience of the high G forces and the training and honestly the perception of danger. Look, rocket flight has come a long way, but there is still a huge perception of danger, right? And so there are many kinds of barriers to the market for that, which is why for us, the balloon flight is so completely transformational for the market. So not only is the price much less expensive for us, instead of tens of millions, at the moment, it's $125,000 a ticket. So now you're getting into the full pyramid of high net worth individuals, of which there are only over 60 million around the world. And that's growing every year as well. And then you're also talking about the experience where we've eliminated all those other barriers, right? We've eliminated the high G and all of those, because you literally are going to space at 12 miles an hour. There's a bar on board, there's a loo on board. I mean, we've completely redesigned this experience to where we don't think of ourselves at all in competition with other rocket-based space experiences. We're so differentiated from that. We're more a feeder to, we're in partnership with several, for example. How we think about ourselves is that we're actually placed right at the moment with where we're at with our pricing right now we're right there in the luxury travel industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we're positioning this. And that's where we are from a price point. And that market is huge. So if you think about, I mean, these numbers are kind of mind-boggling. 10% of the world's employees work in travel and tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And almost 10% of the world's GDP is in that. I mean, it's crazy how impactful on the world's economy it is. Then you look at luxury travel, and what's happening is that people are tending across the age groups are tending to move from buying luxury goods into buying luxury experiences. Mm-hmm. So you're also seeing that market growing twice as fast as the luxury goods market. And then you look at the space travel market. So the luxury travel market is growing at 8% a year, is expected to for the next several years on average. The space travel market is growing at 40% of the year. Now, you could say, well, it's easy for us to be growing so quickly because we're at the early stages of this market. If you look at studies, there have been numerous studies done. They all say that we're going to be somewhere around a $9 billion market by the end of the decade, higher, obviously, by the year after. So this is a hugely vibrant market that we're in. And then I would add one other thing. We are at the very, very early stages of this. Mm-hmm. So think of it when we were like at the very early stages of commercial aviation. Mm-hmm. People simply could not imagine how we're using aviation today, and that people all over the world are just flying continuously. And so as we think about where we are in the market today for private space travel and space tourism to space, right? We're at the very early stages. And so who we're seeing showing up at the moment are the early adopters. And those are the people that have always dreamt about going to space. What we're finding with the customers that come to us, and we've already sold over 1,600 tickets, and we're not flying commercially yet. So the people that are showing up with us are people who said, oh my goodness, I have always wanted to go to space. I never thought it was going to happen in my lifetime. And here you are. Thank you.
Right.
But very soon, and we're already working with luxury travel advisors all over the world, you know, we're gonna get into that sort of next group of people in the bell curve of adoption that are going to be, you know, the way I imagine it is in a few years, you're going to have people sitting around the dinner table in the evening, and they're going to be going, hey, where should we go this year? Are we going to go on a safari? Are we going to go on a cruise? Or are we going to go to space? And right. we're not quite there yet, but we will be very soon. That's the kind of conversations that are going to be had, because we're already having people buying out full flights because they want to go with their loved ones and their families.
Yeah.
This is a shared experience.
There's a lot of great information there. I mean, first of all, you're right about, you know, the impact that tourism just has on GDP worldwide. That's why it gets its own episode here from the future space economy. It gets as a major part of the current economy. But what's interesting is that space tourism is following roughly the same trajectory as any other like tourism industries did when they first started. For example, like jet flights, commercial flights started the same thing with railroads. It started with a very small, luxury market, and eventually, became normalized as a method of travel and a travel experience. So that's where I want to kind of go next here. Is I want to talk about how do we normalize space travel as leisure travel, and this is beyond. We can talk about the technical barrier, like making space travel more comfortable. That's part of this, but I want to start with like, how do we go beyond, the physics challenges and the technical challenges to normalize and market space as a leisure market. And I'll start with you, Jane, since you have the sort of gateway experience that you're hoping to create for space travel, like for Tom, as you said.
I think I want to understand the question more, Jeffrey. Sorry. So how do we normalize it technically? Sorry.
No, other than tech, we'll go to technical in a moment. But I want to say, like, how do we market space travel? Like, how do we? You mentioned partnering with some of the existing tourism companies, like all of that. We can talk about all of that, but how do we build this market for the?
So there's a lot to unpack there, right? I think as we get more and more people flying, it's going to kind of happen a little bit more naturally, right? But for us, we really have, I mean, I can only talk about ourselves because that's really what we've been focused on. That's exactly what we've been focused on. How do we get people to really understand that this is an unbelievable experience? I mean, let's just take a sidestep a minute and talk about what kind of experience this is, because it's super important. So when you talk to astronauts, right, about their experience, the thing that they will all talk about is seeing Earth from space and how transformational that is. I mean, it's a deeply moving experience. You know, it's not like you're just looking at a postcard of something and saying, oh, that was a pretty view, and you come back down. I mean, people come back down from space, and many of them are actually changed, and we'll talk about how they're changed. And it is such a transformational experience that they get more involved in social and environmental causes when they return, right? So this is a profound experience, and the people that go to space together are going to be bonded for life. I mean, they just are. It's going to be the most incredible experience. So the first thing is to understand that the experience itself is incredibly moving, deeply. In fact, I was recently talking with Sharon Hagel, who went up on Blue, and she said, don't forget to talk about the emotional impact of this, because for her, it's so deeply emotional that she kind of almost tears up just talking about it, because seeing the Earth from that vantage point was just so profound. And almost everybody will talk about that. So that is really important, because it says this is a really important experience. Then the next thing that we've worked on is to make it something that people can imagine themselves doing. I mean, let's face it, we've called our astronauts national heroes for a reason. Right. Our space program has come up through these incredible historic moments where people have gone on these incredible rocket flights to the moon and taken huge risks for our nation. And that is not what most people want to do. So you have to really change the idea of space travel if you want thousands and thousands of people to suddenly start going to space. So that's why we call the inside of Spaceship Neptune a space lounge. We've completely redesigned it to really feel like a lounge. It's relaxing. People look at the image of the inside of our capsule with the bar and the loo and the Wi-Fi, you know, everything else that goes along with it, and go, oh, that's something I could do.
Right.
So a lot of it is like really completely redefining for people what this experience can be, which doesn't take away from what, you know, Tom is doing. Obviously, if you're going to go to low Earth orbit, there really is no other way right now than to go on a rocket. But if we're in the business of taking thousands of people to space. So for us, it's about completely changing the experience for people and changing their idea of the experience, and really having them understand how profound this experience is going to be for so many of them.
Yeah. And you know, I it's interesting for me because I probably fall into that category, where I'd want the life-changing experience of seeing Earth, but I'm not a thrill seeker. You know, I don't like to put myself in danger on vacation. I mean, that's just all, you know, that's up to your taste. But, you know, I would have probably ridden the Concorde when it was around, just to say I could see it kind of out of my window. But, you know, what we're off, and the Concorde, unfortunately, like, you know, not around anymore. But, you know, when it was around, like, it was kind of moving toward that normalization of using, you know, suborbital, like kind of trying to normalize suborbital or you know, supersonic travel. But Tom, I want to lead in, because we're going to get some questions here from the audience about more of the technical aspects, and since you're talking about orbital travel, how do we make space travel in orbit more comfortable? What are the technical barriers we're looking at? And also, like, is training a requirement? Is that a barrier? Talk a little bit about how we normalize orbital travel.
Yeah, so I think Jane is 100% correct.
Did we lose? I think Tom. I'm sorry.
Tom, I think we lost you.
I think your mic is. We can't hear you anymore. You try going on mute and unmute. While Tom's figuring out his audio issues, let's ask a question from the audience here. Somebody asked, I heard Jane say a 12-mile an hour climb to space, a 2-hour flight time balloon is expected to reach a 24-mile altitude. 24 miles equals 40 kilometers, which is not the 100-kilometer Kármán line. Is that really space tourism?
Love that question. So interestingly, there is no universal definition of space at all. And in fact, we are regulated by the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation, just like anybody else going to space. So the way we think about it is this. Spaceship Neptune flies above 99% of Earth's atmosphere. That last 1% goes way beyond the International Space Station. We're regulated by like a spaceship. And in fact, the reason we are is because Spaceship Neptune has to be built like a spaceship. So yeah, we're space tourism. The way we think about it is it's the edge of space, right?
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I switched to a different microphone. Not sure what happened there. So I was trying to answer your question about normalizing space. And so the hurdles, right? There are some very natural hurdles when you come to flying into Earth orbit, because the physics is really, really hard, right? So you've got to get this capsule that can support life accelerated through the thickness of Earth's atmosphere to very, very high speed so that you can actually stay in space, right? That physics problem will not go away very easily, and there are various futuristic ideas as to how that can be resolved, but it's not going to happen really anytime soon. So you've just got to find other ways to make it more economical. Or you can do what Jane's doing. And I think I love the stratospheric balloon experience, because you're taking the highlight for many people of going to space, which is the phenomenal view, okay? But you're removing some of these other hurdles that make it very inaccessible. So you're removing the need to accelerate through Earth's atmosphere at very, very high speed. So you're taking away a whole element of that physics that makes it hard. You're taking away the high G, which for some people is part of the experience, sure. You're taking away some of the medical requirements, which is a huge barrier. I have age requirements, I have height and weight requirements, I have, sorry, I don't have age, I have health requirements, but that's often linked with age. And Jane doesn't have any of those, at least to the same level that we do if you're going into Earth orbit. Now, it's not, if we're splitting hairs, it's not technically space, but honestly, it doesn't matter, because from a customer's perspective, they're getting the experience of being able to glide far higher than they've ever been before. They get to see the blackness of space above, and you just get to marvel out of the window without all of these encumbrances of spacesuits and small windows and whatever else it may be. Now, some of those for other people will make a wonderful space experience. They'll go and choose to fly on a suborbital flight. So you get the joy of the rocket, and you get the spacesuit, and you get the camaraderie and the training and the health tests, and you get to ride a centrifuge if you want to beforehand, and all these other things that go into a space experience. But you only get a few minutes of being able to look out of the window. So you're talking about normalizing a space experience, and Jane's experience, these high altitude balloons really are starting to achieve that. Once they can demonstrate, you're not quite there yet. Once you can demonstrate that you can get up and down, and you can do it safely, and you can do it repeatably, and the regulators and the customers and the insurance, all those people are happy, then you've got probably the best space experience you can get within the confines of current technology.
I want to go into more detail on that in just a minute, but there is a really great question from the audience here in terms of normalizing the experience, and I'll shoot this one to you, Jane. What are or will be the connectivity needs for complete space tourism experience? Because would space travelers have the chance to stream their space experience to the ground, which is pretty much now how all travel is normalized?
Oh yeah.
So
you have to know it. So on Spaceship Neptune, absolutely. So there's sort of several parts to that. So one is when we're taking our explorers up, there absolutely will be ways for people to stream back to Earth, live stream. Okay, we're actually thinking about cutting it off for a short period of the flight because we actually do want people to be completely present for a period of the flight without being glued to their phone or whatever. But yes, there will absolutely be that. Also, the other thing for us is that with Spaceship Neptune, we're going to be up there, at least on the early flights, we're limiting it to a couple of hours, though eventually it'll be much longer than that. But in the early flights, you'll be up there for a couple of hours. So now think of this as a content studio in space as well. So we're going to have the ability to do real broadband streaming from space as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks for answering that question. Tom, I want to go back to you because I asked about training as a barrier, and I just want to make sure, like, how long can people spend on an orbital flight without training, and at what point do they need training for their space tourism experience?
Well, in order to step on to the spacecraft on launch day and get on the rocket, you need to have gone through a whole host of training. I mean, it can be as short as 4 to 6 weeks, but it can be as long as 4 to 6 months. And it depends on what your final destination is. Particularly if you're going to the space station, the training requirement can be quite a lot longer. Plus, what is it that you want to do when you get there? Because that makes up a lot of the training element, is making sure you understand the operations of the space station so you can interact with it and actually do something. So there is no situation for an orbital spaceflight. And by orbital, just make sure everybody understands, this is when you're getting up to 200-300 miles above the Earth. You're traveling at 17,000 miles an hour. You're circling around the Earth continually. You go around the Earth every 90 minutes. And you're staying in space for, for multiple days, as opposed to a few minutes or a few hours. So this is a very involved space experience. And so, the training requirements are very real. And I was talking about price being a barrier. Once we actually got, I've spent the last 18 years talking to high net worth individuals, and if they have the money, oftentimes the money is not the issue. Making a decision whether to go or not, it's, do they have the time? Can they set aside and step away from their life for a number of months in order to prepare for a multi-week experience? So time is very significant consideration, and training is the reason for that.
Can that training be part of the space tourism experience? Like, can you create a whole leisure? I know space training can be difficult. You're training somebody to manage in a difficult physical environment, but can it be? I mean, I just think back to like NASA Space Camp, which was like a huge thing in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid.
So yes, in short, yes, it can. We have done it for years. We've arranged for people to go and experience, they may ride in the centrifuge, they may go into, try on the spacesuit, they may sit in a spacecraft simulator. So we have done those sort of occasional day experiences for many, many years. And it's not a gigantic market, I'll be honest, but it's, yes, that is possible. And there are now companies here in the US who are setting up to do that sort of thing, whether it's in preparation for a future suborbital or an orbital flight, or just because it's fun. But I think that market is still relatively limited. The weightless flights are a valid part of a astronaut training program. And so they took that very interesting piece out, and Zero G built a company. They have the plane that operates here just behind where Jane is standing right now. And so you can go for that half day and experience the weightlessness of space. So yes, there is a piece of that. And we've done even longer. And we've had clients who paid us multiple millions to go and train as the backup for one of our primary crew members. And that's taking that multi-month experience, and all they're doing is the training. And they're participating as a member of the backup crew, and they're getting all of that same in-depth knowledge and understanding of what it takes to be an astronaut without the payoff at the end, without the flight. But for them, the reason for doing it is just to live that astronaut experience with a view to being able to fly at some point in the future.
Yeah, if I could just add one other thing, I think in terms of normalizing, I think what we find is that people are, there's an echo. Is that on my side?
Tom, if you mute your mic, I think it'll.
Sorry. So I think a lot of people kind of struggle with the idea that the idea of going to space is because we all want to escape space and go somewhere else, right? Because we talk a lot about going to the moon or going to Mars, and that's a very real thing, right? Not that we want to escape it, but that we want to go beyond. But in order to normalize it, I think for us, what we're really about isn't about going away from Earth. It's about turning back and exploring Earth, but exploring it from that perspective. So in many ways, you get closer to Earth by leaving it. And that's a very profound thing. And that also helps people to go, oh, I see why it's important now. And I think that's really critical for people to understand. You know, as Jacques Cousteau famously said, we care for what we love. And what tends to happen is people go to space, they see the planet with that perilously thin blue line of the atmosphere that, as Nicole Stott would say, is the only boundary that matters. Yeah. And they suddenly realize, holy cow, we really do all live as a single family on spaceship Earth. And that really, really can drive change. And I think it's really important that people understand that.
Yeah.
As part of normalizing this experience for people.
Right. I mean, we all travel for different reasons, right? We all have different interpretations of what is a vacation and what is an experience. And as I said, if we look at history, like this is how any other travel market has started. It's on the same trajectory, where as human beings, we're naturally curious. And the fact that like most people in the world can access other parts of the world by jet travel is a still relatively new concept. Couple of questions. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
Very good. I just wanted to add a thought there. So I think you've got to look at space when you're talking about normalizing space and space tourism. You can take your time and go and spend it just on space, which is a lot of what we've been talking about. Preparing for a flight to space or going to a training center in order to learn space. But if you look at just how much space is consumed by people on their vacations at the moment, like right behind where Jane is one of the busiest visitor centers in the country. I think an awful lot of people who visit Florida and Orlando go out to the Space Coast. So they may not be going just to go there, but while they're in Florida and in the area, they are dedicating a portion of their leisure time to this topic of space and immersing themselves in it for a day or so. Just down the road from where I am in Washington, D.C. is the Air and Space Museum. There's two of them here. Incredibly busy. I think it's probably the busiest museum in the U.S., if not in the world, in terms of number of visitors. So space is and will always continue to be a very interesting and appealing part of our culture, and people will incorporate it as part of their leisure time. But you've got to look at it as this continuum of engagement, whether it's just for a couple hours while you're on a trip to DC, or if it is spending 6 months. It's still a very key part of who we are as people, and it captures attention across all age ranges. There is still, we talk about space tourism as being very new because the act of going into space is still relatively hard, but space as a whole as a concept has been around for generations and will continue to be.
Absolutely. And that's a good way to think about the space tourism market. And that's why I was saying it extends beyond just the flight itself. It's the experience of it. of learning about space, of also, attending a launch is also, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity, like just seeing a rocket launch into space is it's a big deal. Like it's a different experience.
It's an interesting point, Jeff, because the one thing that space has been highly unpredictable. Space launch was for many, many years. If you remember back to the shuttle days, there could be a launch date set, but you could wind up literally camping on the coast for 2 weeks until it actually launched and it actually happened. But what SpaceX has done is made it incredibly predictable.
Right.
Recently. So now if you want to go see a launch, you can literally look through the manifest and you'll see one of, maybe what is it this year, about 40 or 50 launches that you can go choose from. And you can be pretty certain that if you go on that day and at that time, the rocket is actually going to launch, right? So we're, as an industry, I think we're getting better at meeting that basic need, right? Where it was really hard to actually get to see a rocket launch. Now it's comparatively easy, and it will continue to be. And I think that's it's a sign of how the industry is maturing and making itself more accessible.
Jane, just a couple of I have a question for you here from the audience. But they want to know, like, how young or how old do you have to be to go on the balloon? Is there an age requirement?
At the moment, there is, Jeffrey. So, as I mentioned, we are regulated by the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation. At the moment, the age is 18. We are hoping that they will agree with us that 16-year-olds will be able to go. I think it will be a long time before, anyone under the age of 14 is going to be able to go.
Okay. And Tom, just for information's sake, like, is it the same for orbital travel as well?
18, yeah.
Okay, all right. I just want to knock out some of these because they're asking about the specific experiences. Jane, will the balloon flights depart from and land in selected cities across the U.S., the world? What are the destinations?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be launching. We can launch both from land, such as Kennedy Space Center, which would be pretty cool. But our baseline for a lot of our flights is going to be from our Marine Spaceport. Voyager is our initial ship that we're launching from, and then we splash in the ocean. It gives us huge amounts of flexibility. It's really safe. It also gives us the reliable launch windows, Tom, that you were talking about, that is particularly important for tourism. We don't want people to be showing up on the Space Coast and going, well, where's my flight? Oh, it'll be sometime in the next 3 weeks. That's not going to work. So the ship is really going to be really good for that because it opens up our operational window. So we're going to start our flights around Florida. And then we're going to be operating in different locations around the world after that. Our flights are, at the moment, we're scheduled for our first commercial flight around the end of 24. Don't put it on your calendar, but, so that kind of time frame. We're going to get into test flights. You're going to see us in test flights sometime later this year as well with Spaceship Neptune. We did some flights earlier in 21. And we're getting back into test flights with a fully pressurized Spaceship Neptune, very similar to the one that we'll actually be flying our customers in. This initial capsule is a test capsule, so it's going to be incredibly instrumented. But when I think about where we want to fly from, I mean, one of the beautiful things about being able to operate from a ship is it means we have enormous flexibility. So when you talk to astronauts about, what are the incredible things about what you see in space, obviously that black sky, the thin blue line, all of that, the curvature, all of that goes without saying. But the other thing that they talk about is seeing something you recognize from space, like some landmass, some object. And so we're going to be flying in and around Florida. So most Americans would recognize Florida from space, which is super cool. We're also going to be able to see the Bahamas and the Keys, which, also where you see land and ocean coming together, the colors, it's just spectacular, the views. Now imagine you fly over the boot of Italy, or you fly in the Southern Med and you see the pyramids or the Nile Delta, or you fly somewhere completely different, like in Southeast Asia. I also want to see the Northern Lights from space. This is one of my goals.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Tom, just for people who don't know, what are your launch and what are your launch ports and how do people access space from your services?
So there's operationally at the moment just one launch vehicle, and that's the SpaceX that is available for private individuals to fly on. We previously, as a reference, were working with the Russians on the Soyuz, and hopefully in the future the Boeing Starliner will become available. Now the SpaceX Dragon launches from Kennedy Space Center behind Jane. Reference that again. The Soyuz launches from Kazakhstan, so our clients used to go train in Moscow and then fly out to Kazakhstan for the launch. And Boeing will similarly be launching from Kennedy Space Center.
Okay. And then, Tom, I asked Jane about the minimum age. Somebody asked, and you had mentioned it's more about health than it is about age, but they said, is there a maximum age for space flight? If you maybe give details on the health requirements.
So I think the oldest person to fly to space, I think it was John Glenn when he was 77. Is that right? Does that sound right, Jane?
Well, it depends what kind of space. If you're talking suborbital, right? William Shatner went up at 92 or something. I mean, that's pretty something.
Yeah. So the health requirements for orbital flight are difficult to characterize, but basically you've got to be in reasonable shape. You've got to be able to withstand the high G environment, and you've got to have no medical conditions that may cause problems when you're on orbit. And so if you can medicate, then fine. But if a different type of intervention may be needed in the event that something goes wrong, then you probably won't be allowed to fly.
Okay. All right. So I want to at least hit on two more questions. The first, I referenced this at the beginning, but I want to talk about who is coming into the space industry and partnering with you guys. Who are some of the legacy or some of the traditional tourism or travel companies that are looking to build off of the space tourism excitement? Jane, I'll start with you. I know you said you've partnered with some companies for the experiential end of the service you're providing. You want to talk a little bit about those partnerships?
So our experiential partnerships, I can't really talk about yet.
Okay.
Those are coming soon. However, we are partnered from a ticketing point of view with a bunch of different groups. So that initially, that is sort of your luxury travel advisors, right? Virtuosos, Signature, cruise planners, big entities like that. We even have now relationships with international organizations, global travel companies, such as HIS out of Japan, that has a luxury travel part of their business. So we have organizations like that all around the world, and you will soon be hearing about some amazing brand partnerships. And for us, what we're really excited about is even beyond that, right? So we also are really excited to fly artists of all kinds, and I'm using that word very liberally. We want to fly artists, not just really let's do the first DJing in space. That's kind of not what it's about, although that's fine too. It's more about let's have these incredible blue chip artists go to space, like experience what we call the space perspective, what Frank White and everyone calls the overview effect. Let's have them really experience this and then come back and do something amazing with that. What are they going to do with that experience? And how do we then interact with their experience of going to space? How do they communicate that? I think that's going to be incredible. I really do, on every level.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. And we were going to talk about like how do arts and entertainment play a role in normalizing space.
Well, what I think is super interesting is this normalizing is just going to sort of take care of itself eventually, because as more and more people fly, I think about the day when most people know somebody who's been to space. And I don't think that's too very far off. I don't. I think it's a super exciting thing to think about. And I mean, imagine if every school had somebody who'd been to space and had this incredible experience of seeing our Earth from that vantage point. Mm-hmm. And our major world leaders have been to space. I mean, I think maybe some of the conversations would be a bit different.
And Tom, the other question I want to get to were about space stations. How do they fit in the picture? I know you have flown people to ISS, but we have some commercial space stations in the works, and some tourism industry interest there. Like, how do space stations fit into this market?
Yeah, so they don't fit yet, but they are coming for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, private space stations have been talked about for as long as I've been in the industry, which is nearly 20 years and a long time before then. But they're starting to really become a genuine reality. NASA a couple of years ago, just for history, NASA a couple of years ago ran a solicitation. They're trying to plan for the end of the International Space Station, which at this point I think is the end of this decade, where they're planning to deorbit the International Space Station, and they want to buy similar services from private companies because they've demonstrated with their relationship with SpaceX and the Commercial Crew Program and others that buying commercial services is a much more economical way for them to go. So they're saying, okay, we will help catalyze this industry. And they made, I think it was 3 awards to different companies in this one particular solicitation. And there's a 4th company that they're supporting in a slightly different way. So over the course of the next 5 years, certainly between now and the end of the decade, we'll see what shakes out from those entities as to whether they're actually able to put some hardware in orbit. Not all of them are planning on making those available for space tourists, which is perfectly reasonable. Space tourism is only a small piece of that commercial space market. They're focusing on the scientific research community and government astronauts, and there's a very close relationship between government astronauts and that science community. And then outside of that, there are a couple companies that have come out of the woodwork in the last couple of years who are focusing on building private space stations as well without support from NASA, with purely commercial and private venture support. So yeah, there's some really interesting things happening. It's too early to tell, who will be successful and who will actually get hardware on orbit. They're taking different approaches. One is Voyager has partnered with Hilton to do some of their interior design, and Hilton as a brand has been associated with space for many, many years, going back to before me. I know there were talks about a Hilton space station, and I'm sure we'll see more and more of that as we go forward, because creating a habitat in space just opens up an enormous potential for brand engagement, brand endorsement. I know Jane's alluded to that she's got some news coming. Just if you think through what that experience is and different ways that brands could get involved in that and support it. And, you can't turn on TV at the moment without a TV ad somehow involving space or pulling on that space as an interest, whether it's a car ad or something else. So there's definitely a strong commercial interest in all sorts of different ways, whether it's shooting commercials featuring space and the views from space in your commercial, or actually just building your brand into that experience. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how it will go.
Jane, is there anything you want to add to that about how do space stations fit into the space tourism picture? Or do you think Tom covered pretty much everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. I think there's a lot going on. What I think is, look, space has inspired us, especially here in the US, for many, 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 many years. I think about the time, when we have people in multiple space stations. I mean, in a sense, we already do, right, between the ISS and the Chinese space station, right? But having people up there continuously, and increasingly, and going further and further out, I mean, I think it's super interesting. It's just all part of the evolution. It's what's happening. I think what is really exciting is that we're seeing in this human spaceflight arena, we're beginning to see the maturation of a whole ecosystem. from a purely industry point of view, right? So you've got enough business coming online where we can actually be having sane conversations, credible conversations about having several space stations orbiting planet Earth. And it wasn't too long ago where people were scratching their heads wondering why we had one. So it's the whole ecosystem is really beginning to mature, which for somebody like myself and Tom, who's been in this industry for a long time, I've been in it longer than you, Tom, 35 years. So I'm super excited to see where this is all going. So one thing I wanted to mention, because I forgot to at the beginning, is to say also, as a company that takes people up to see Earth from space, for us, as part of our brand and as part of how we behave as people on this spaceship Earth, we're very lucky that our spaceship actually is carbon neutral in the way that we fly it, and the materials that we're able to use to take it to space. Not every space company has that luxury, in a sense, right? But we do also then operate the company as a carbon neutral company. And that's the kind of action that comes from having these kinds of experiences. I lived this experience in a way from my time inside Biosphere 2, right? Where I was part of a biosphere, Biosphere 1 being the Earth. It was a completely sealed environment. There were 8 of us in there. It was sealed tighter than the International Space Station at the moment we were in there. And, we really got the sense that at a very visceral level that we were enclosed with everything we had because we could see the edges of our world. And that, of course, is the same experience that astronauts have. So that does result in those kinds of behaviors and is one reason why the company is operated in the way that it is.
Just a couple of things here. Somebody in the audience just mentioned who was involved in the orbital reef, the mixed-use space station. And I'll just read some of these company names. So Blue Origin, Sierra Space, Boeing, Redwire, Genesis Engineering Solutions, Arizona State University. So they formed the team for orbital reef. So thank you for just sharing that with the audience here. One person asked about science work and the role science is going to play. I want this to be its own episode, but I want to give us a chance before we wrap up today, to talk about how the scientific travel. Why do we talk about this in the same conversation with space tourism? What is one opening the door to the other for space travel companies, Tom?
Yeah, so all of our clients who've flown space, certainly in at least the last 7 of them, when they've been on the space station, they have participated in science investigations of one form or another, and their level of participation has varied. But one of the reasons that we as humans are in space is to help learn how to be in space and how to be able to stay in space longer. And the more data points we build up on how different humans react being in space helps further that goal. So space tourists, when they go, if they can contribute in some way by measuring their data, the data of how their body reacts and feeding that into studies, then they can take specific experiments up with them and conduct those on orbit as a valuable use of their time. At the end of the day, they're spending 8, 10, 12 days in space. If they can dedicate a little bit of that time to advancing the scientific agenda, then that is a good thing. And it's also interesting, right? You're on vacation, you want to do something that you don't just want to lie around reading a book, that gets old. So if you can actually do something else, it's interesting. And that same concept is feeding down into suborbital space flight. I'll let Jane answer for what the scientific aspects of the stratospheric balloons are, but it's a unique opportunity. And so you've got to try to maximize that opportunity, not just from a pure experiential perspective, but from how can you spend your time constructing.
So on Spaceship Neptune, for us, the research is something that our customers are going to be able to, our tourists, if you will be able to get involved in to a degree. But we also can do ride shares. So we're going to be having research payloads on every flight. And what's really unusual about this spaceship is that it's going to be going slowly up and down through the atmosphere on repeat transects in very unusual locations and all around the world. And so we're going to be able to get research answered in ways that really can't be addressed any other way, which is really exciting. So the kinds of things that we're going to be able to do are atmospheric science, climate change, really important for that. There's some traditional things that we're going to be able to do as well. That by traditional, I mean they're the kinds of things that are done traditionally with these kinds of balloons. So that would be astrophysics, astronomy, solar physics, even as astrobiology, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of different things. And then, of course, we're going to be out at sea, so we can also do some marine.
Excellent. For the couple of people asked about spacecraft design for the future and how it impacts markets like this, that's going to be an episode in its own for the second season. Also, while you wait for that, check out Via Satellite Magazine's October issue coming up. I did an interview with Peter Beck from Rocket Lab, and we had an interesting conversation about this. So check it out. That'll be out in the middle of next month, my interview with Peter. Jane, Tom, thank you both so much for being here with us. It's exciting to hear the developments in space tourism, and this certainly won't be the end of this conversation as we see these activities starting to pick up now that we're out of the pandemic. But Jane, Tom, thank you so much for speaking. It's good to see you. Any quick final last words, Tom, about?
No, thank you for organizing, and thank you for people taking their time to come and listen. Hopefully, so you walked away with something of value.
Yeah, no, indeed. Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. And in terms of normalizing going to space, you can now buy your ticket to space online. Just in case you want to find more out about us, it's spaceperspective.com. Excellent.
Well, thank you both so much. And once again, also thank you to our sponsors for season 1 of Future Space Economy, Sidus Space, Spider Oak, and Kepler. Join us next month. I believe our next episodes are going to focus on energy industry in space. We're also going to talk about cybersecurity in space, national security in space. And then you can see the future episodes. That I think we have 4 left in this first season. You can see them up on onorbitspace.com. Once again, my name is Jeffrey Hill. You've been watching the Future Space Economy webcast series. Thank you for being here with us, and we hope to see you again next month.